Morning, Tara.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
Good. Just waiting for everyone else to join.
You can just watch me check my email.
Right, exactly.
Where were you?
Morocco.
Oh my God, I want to see your picture.
Yeah, Morning, Tara.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Jenny.
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
Good.
It's like bringing us
For
back.
everyone else to join.
Do you hear that?
I think that was the live stream echoing. So I'm pretty sure that's what that was all about. So, Steven here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right.
Recording in progress.
All right, everybody. I'm going to try to keep us on time today. I know Andy shared with me that he won't be able to make it today, so we won't have Andy on. And I do want to try to keep this as quick as possible so that we can move through this portion. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting, special meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. I'm going to do a quick roll call. Tara,
Here.
Lana,
Here.
Steve, Jeannie.
Here.
Okay, so I do have a quorum. I'm missing Lindsay, Katie, and Andy. Okay. Did everybody get a chance to approve the special agenda that I sent out? Wonderful. Can I have a motion to approve that agenda?
Also move.
All right, Lana, do I have a second?
Okay.
All right, Steve, second. All right. I want to go ahead and just do a brief executive session before we let Tommy Matthews in to just kind of loop everybody in on kind of where we're at on a few things. I did share Tommy Matthews' proposal with Dylan, which is why he's present during this executive session, to share a little bit of his perspective from a city planner's perspective on the scope of Tommy Mather's proposal and what we may need and what we may not need. Obviously, you all have seen Tommy Matthews' proposal, and it is double our budget for this project for what the grant requires. If we do choose to go with Tommy Matthews through this process, we will need to do a change of scope through the CTO, which again is not a big deal. I've already let them know that we might be doing this. However, if we do need to do a change of scope, that does require a lot of changes. And if it is a significantly high budgetary ask, they will ask us to make sure that we have the remainder of that within our budget. And I'm not sure, again, from a budgetary conversation, the BCPB's budget doesn't necessarily have enough cushion to cover double the wayfinding budget, if that makes sense. Steve?
When we talked about it a few weeks ago, we weren't sure that Triba understood that we had a lot of the branding done already, and we were going to talk to them and see if they understood that and could adjust this quote.
Correct. That's part of what today's conversation will be about as well, with Tommy once he's on. But I wanted to kind of have Dylan pop on a little bit and talk a little bit about what we might be able to have internally as well, so that we can definitely speak to Tommy today from an educated perspective. Dylan?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I reviewed the proposal, and while I think, obviously Triba is they're experts in the field. I really think that with Ember and then between sort of all of us in-house and maybe with our city engineering team, we can do a lot of that work in-house. Sadie and I have already put together a kind of a this is where we're at now sort of map. That's probably not 100%, but basically taking here's all of the current wayfinding stuff we have that directs people to various points in town. And so given that we already have that baseline, it strikes me that working collaboratively as a group, we can likely stick within the budget that we already sort of have and just focus on doing it in-house. And if it's not 100% expert level, maybe that's okay because we can refine it over time. That's sort of my thought from reading it, but I have not engaged with our engineering team to see if what sort of tools they would have at their disposal or what it might cost us to have our, engineers from JVA look at it. But they deal with traffic studies and those sorts of things all the time. So I feel like they know where pinch points are in town and where people are coming from and where they're going to. So that's my thought on it really, is that like obviously Tribal will put together something really nice looking at their scope of services, but I don't think it's worth double what we sort of have in the grant.
Thank you, Dylan, for your perspective. I really appreciate it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please, Lynn.
Does the city have the capacity to work on this project? Is that going to be an issue?
There's definitely capacity. We know that there's a clear need for it, or else we wouldn't have pushed forward with, supporting, I guess, the wayfinding grant and all of that. I obviously have a lot that I'm working on, but I think there's capacity there. Again, like I said, it probably won't be as good as having someone super focused on it, but we will still have Ember. And, if they can propose some initial things, then I think it would be beneficial to be able to pass on, hey, this is what we're thinking, pass that on to the engineers and on to, that sort of consultant that will be a lot cheaper, and say, does this make sense or does it not make sense? Rather than having someone pass something on to us and do all the work for us.
Okay, great.
Steve?
So I'm wondering if we cheat a little bit and we let the Argo move forward with their plan with Triba, and then we use Ember to get closer to what they have. Because so far, as far as I know, what we've seen from Ember, no one really is excited about the direction that he was going.
Okay. Tara, do you have any
I just-
questions?
I wasn't sure what you meant about they're not excited about the direction that who's going in.
Ember did a proposal and has done some renderings, and I, for one, don't like it at all.
Oh, got it. Okay.
It's hard to read. It's the type font is off. It doesn't fit with the I think the Idaho Springs branding. I know that I've had conversations with other people who feel the same way. But I don't know if that was a final or just a.
Are you talking about what was in like the original, like when he put out like those little tiny signs that were like, I think
Yeah.
those were just like off the cut. I do not think that like we haven't seen anything from Nate that is like taking into account actual wayfinding research or any, because we stopped him. We had our first initial kickoff meeting with him and then we stopped. I think what was in the original like branding package thing that had some brief signage in it, I don't think was a full representation of what he was proposing at all. I think it was just like an initial kind of like brief stab in the dark, at least from my understanding. I could be incorrect on that. However, I haven't seen anything further from him that actually represents true and actual wayfinding. So there is that to consider as well.
And I want to be clear that when I talk about city capacity, it would be like locations of signs and things like that, circulation and that sort of thing, not the branding of signs themselves, which we need Ember to do. And if you all aren't happy with Ember, then obviously that's an issue that would need to be sorted out.
Another question, sorry. I'm wondering how important we feel that the city wayfinding is close to the Argo wayfinding. Is there any value to have them branded similarly, or if we use two different companies that aren't communicating, they're using the company, the Triba, and we're using Ember, they're not going to be, they might not be that similar. Does that matter?
Well, I think one thing that's important to note, and Dylan brought this up as well, we will need to be very careful from the city's wayfinding perspective. We cannot have any city wayfinding saying Argo cable car, because in our city sign code, and correct me if I'm incorrect, Dylan, that's not allowed. We could say gondola directionality, hot springs directionality, bike mountain park directionality. However, we cannot specifically call out a business in our city's wayfinding due to the fact that then every business would then want a sign specifically for their business. So we have to be very careful from the city's wayfinding that ours, while we want to be complementary and we want our wayfinding to flow well together, hence the part of why we're having a wayfinding collaborative process, we do need to be clear that the city's wayfinding needs to be complementary and overarching as a umbrella and not specific to one business. Dylan, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right. The key thing is that we don't allow off-premise signs at the moment per the sign code. So like if you have a private business, the signage needs to be on your property. So that could obviously be changed if as part of this we said we want to support certain businesses or what have you, because they have a critical, that's the direction that we want to go, but that would be a code amendment to the sign code. But I do think it would be completely reasonable to highlight, here's the key places we want to go, downtown restaurants and shops, historic district, gondola, bike, trailhead, etc., hot springs, the places that people are getting off the highway and immediately going to. And that seems like something that can complement the Argo and the cable car project. But my sort of concern with any of this is I don't really know what the Argo is thinking as far as that off premise, since it is a collaborative process. Are they looking to do Triba, have them designing signs that are going on city right of way or in CRC Park or downtown? That really doesn't fit within our sign code. That's something that as we work through the process collaboratively, it'll have to be clear, what are they planning for? Because, any business wanting to put signage that's not on their property, unless it's been grandfathered in over decades, like the hot springs billboard that's on I-70, that's been there for so long, we can't make them remove it, for example. That needs to sort of be a policy choice as well as we move forward with this.
I was strictly talking about branding, not about the words on it, sort of the look, because they're also like, so Argo, Idaho Springs, you have Kumba, V-Camp, the Federal Mobility Center, and then the Highway Department, all having different branding per se. It'd be nice to kind of have some cohesiveness between them all. If I know it's impossible, but something considered.
Tara?
Question. So is there a way that we could have the code have like specific requirements. For example, like to be on the CDOT sign, you have to be open like 6 days a week or something. And then I think they pay. So do you know about that, Steve? Like what the requirements are? I know that there are specific requirements to be on those like attractions or whatever signs that are on the highway. So
Oh, yeah.
like I think having at least like if we are, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if even though it says hot springs, people are like, why did you do that? So like I think that I think we should set up some kind of stipulations and maybe they're easy to obtain, maybe they're not, but I think that there should be just something like this amount of people like visit it or whatever it is so that we can refer to that even if it doesn't have the brand on it, the name on it, and then potentially like a buy-in type thing. So like if you spend a certain amount of money and you meet these other requirements or something, so it's like a contribution because I'm sure you have to pay for those CDOT ones. And then I don't think it's a bad idea at all to watch Argo do it first, to get like our wheels turning and see what they're doing and then like either emulate it or we're going to need to know the variants anyway, right?
Yeah, and I agree, like, while watching them to see where we want to be complementary, we do need to be aware of our timeline. So we do have a grant timeline that we need to operate within. And as of this point, I've already told the CTO that we're probably not going to be meeting our original timeline that we submitted, because we've delayed so much already. We do have until March of 26 is the final deadline. And that's a hard firm. So if we're going to change our timeline, there's two things that will need to take place. We're probably going to need to do a change order on the timeline no matter what, just because we've delayed. And then two, if we change any kind of because we named a preferred vendor in our grant application, if we change who we're paying in any way, shape, or form, I will also have to do a change order there. So those two things are the two items that are grant requirements that will be, we also very clearly lined out in our grant guidelines that we would be participating with Argo and Comba because they're paying into the grant. They're part of the grant match. They're both paying in $2,500 to participate in this process so that it's complementary and in consideration of bringing these new items online. Is it also important that we acknowledge that there are more than just two attractions in Idaho Springs? Of course, we're not going to be leaving out hot springs. We're not going to be leaving out the downtown historic district. The reason they were called out specifically is because they are new to the city, and we wanted to align to bring complementary. They asked to be included to have complementary wayfinding, meaning that again, if we're going to pick a color, for example, we're going to say all signs are going to be this color. They're going to say, okay, we agree, all signs are going to be this color. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like the proposal would be like basically working in tandem with them and using funding from BCPB. Is there a reason like why it's just like, is it because we're coming up against the end of the year and we're like, we do have some money, let's put it into this pot type situation with the business community promotion, or is there like some like motivation behind that, or is there other like, or that was just written into the grant?
What do you mean?
Like, why is the business community promotions board being the funding for it? Is it because
the
like
grant is required? Grant requires match.
It was written into the grant.
Yeah, grants require matching funds. So to get the grant money, the city, meaning the Business and Community Promotion Board, had to give a certain amount of matching funds to secure the grant. A portion of those matching funds are also from Comba and from Argo.
Okay.
However, the BCPB is the primary grant match. So we're providing $10,000 of grant matching funds. And then Comba and Argo are adding in, which get us the grant amount plus this, plus gets us to 30 grand.
Is the city, like, does the city not have money from somewhere else, or does it have to be from? I'm just concerned about that match element, like,
The match is budgeted into our 2025 budget, so that's
Okay.
budgeted money. We have that money already budgeted to be spent in 2025 on the grant.
okay,
And we've already received the grant money from the CTO as well. So we've already received our disbursement from the CTO, from Colorado State Tourism. They've already sent us our grant money.
okay,
So right now in the bank of the grant, we have 20 grand, 20. Yeah, we have 20 grand.
and we're not gonna have to seek anymore.
If we choose to go with a different proposal that costs more than what we have been quoted with Ember, then yes, we will. Like if we choose to go with
Okay.
Tommy Matthews' proposal, which is, as of right now, $65,000. Again, after this conversation, we might have a revision from him. However, if we go to the point where we have this, we will have to seek additional funds, whether that's from our budget or we need to ask for matching funds from other contributing places, or we would have to look for additional ways to bridge that.
But the
money.
company that's working with the Argo is affordable for us as it is. No.
That's
Okay.
Tribe, who we're just about to let in. And I'm gonna go ahead and,
Okay.
at this point, unless we have some.
Sorry, I'm just
clarifying-
trying to get on the
Yeah, no, I
right page
hear
with it. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let in Tommy and his team from Triba, just so we can kind of get some clarity from them and maybe see if there is a way that the proposal would be less. Gain some clarity there. So I'm gonna go ahead and admit them in. Hello, thank you for your patience.
Hello, Sadie. Hello, all.
Hello?
Tommy
Hello.
Matthews here.
Thanks for jumping on with us, Tommy. We really appreciate your time today.
I'm glad to get to.
Yeah, we had a quick executive session to just bring everybody up on speed. We also have our city planner on the meeting today, Dylan, kind of holding
Hi, Dylan.
space from what we have done, what the city has internally, and kind of discussing how we can move forward with
Right.
this exciting project. So kind of just to give you a little bit of understanding, I think you and I briefly spoke about this when we met in person the other day.
Yes.
While reviewing your proposal, I think there's quite a few things in the proposal that might have already been done that we are wanting to gain some clarity on flexibility on price point.
Yep.
Obviously the 65,000 is significantly over the grant budget. So the grant
Yep.
budget's at 30,000, and the Business and Community Promotion Board currently doesn't have a lot of extra funding to go over that much.
Yes. Yes.
We are coming up to the end of our budgetary year, obviously, and this grant was built into our 2025 budget.
Right.
And we don't really have a ton of flexibility about how much more we could really afford outside of the grant's scope.
Yes.
I have spoken to CTO, Colorado State Tourism, and while they're comfortable with us doing any kind of change of scope, that it would require a change of scope on the grant to kind of do any switching in a vendor at this point in time, which is totally fine. It would just require a delay in our grant timeline. So two things, I would have to do a change of scope and a change of timeline with the CTO. The board has understood kind of where we are now and where we're going, and kind of trying to loop in. There's a lot of conversation about how to be complementary to Argo coming online, and considering that importance, as well as understanding that the city's overarching wayfinding plan needs to be broad and not
Yes.
specific to one business.
Totally.
And that we, for example, cannot put a sign on city property that says Argo cable car this direction without changing sign code or policy. So it gets to be kind of more broad, yet we all understand the importance of complementary branding and signage when it comes to creating an aesthetic and a feel and a tone of voice, and how we're speaking to people that are entering into our municipality. I wanted to go ahead and start by if you have anything you'd like to say to the board, and then we'll move into them having some questions for you.
Sounds good. Sadie, I just want to point out that Josh Gluck is also on the line. He's a fellow team member here at Triba Architects.
Hi, all. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you again,
Steve,
Sadie.
good to see you again. I
Yeah.
enjoyed our breakfast down here in Denver a few weeks back,
Yeah.
and nice to meet the rest of you on the line here. Just, by way of brief introduction, I'm coming at you from Denver, Colorado, just down the hill. I work with Triba Architects. I don't know if any of you know much about Triba. We're a firm about 35 years in, 38 years in, founded by David Owen Triba. And I think we've really, from the start of this firm's practice, had a focus on historic preservation and adaptive reuse. And that's shown itself in whole variety of scales and expressions, some notable expressions, Denver Union Station and the Crawford Hotel, getting to bring that historic station into new and vibrant use. Worked with Dana Crawford closely on that. Dana was the connection to Argo and Idaho Springs for us. She brought us into that project years ago. Um, we offer a very integrated set of services at Triba, and what I mean by that is our firm is really an architecture and urban planning firm, and we have a strong branding and experiential design studio within that. And I think what benefit that brings to Idaho Springs is that we're very well versed in thinking about the bigger picture, as in not trying to solve every problem with a graphic design or signage solution, but we're very interested in, Sadie, to your point, building on the work that you have already been doing, as in we're coming in, recognizing, joining a moving train type of thing. And so we don't want to approach this as a starting from scratch type of exercise, but rather kind of like an adaptive reuse or preservation project. First and foremost, get a very good understanding of what you already have going. And what I mean by that is what ideas are already in motion, but also what strengths of the place are the key elements to build on. So I think you'll find a team that arrives with open ears and looking eyes, very much about getting well rooted. Our great goal here is to make a few adjustments, a few new things that are going to feel very, if we're successful, feel very much like they fit the place. It's going to be we're hoping to work with you to achieve some tune-up adjustments that are going to help Idaho Springs be more itself than ever. And so I guess I just want to put that on the table as an opening statement about approach is building on what you have. The scope of work as described is, we've put together a proposal that's our interpretation of the scope, which is looking at the entire extent of Idaho Springs and working toward a signage program that will greatly improve the wayfinding to an increasing set of offerings for how rich a visit to Idaho Springs can be. And as new elements, new quote unquote attractions are coming online. This seems like an excellent time, an excellent opportunity to do that. Our minds are going to how can the Virginia Canyon Mountain Park become a really legible part of the Idaho Springs Parks network. And that might mean thinking about how can some of the parks that are in town start to gain more of a system identity with a coherent relationship to the adjacent mountain park to help reveal that this is a municipal park system that's both in town and in the mountain. We're very interested in how the new trail network along Clear Creek is an asset for the city and obviously tying into a much bigger network. But, we know that this wayfinding system must make full use of the new connections that are available to you. We're recognizing sides of the highway approach. How do we help people understand the hot springs and, key things like heading up Mount Blue Sky, what the water wheel and the symbolic power of that is. So I guess the scope, the fee, the kind of rubber meets the road fee that we put together is very much comprehensive. We're not thinking that this is about solving, for example, Minor Street alone, but it's a bigger citywide approach. Say to your point about work has already been underway on analysis and uncovering the needs, the key pressure points, pain points, so to speak. Your proposition that we can build on that, I think, is valid, and we're totally willing to truncate that opening phase of our work, which is about analysis and getting oriented. We love the idea of building on what you've already got. At the same time, we need to download that into our minds. We need to be fully oriented in order to come up with recommendations that are stitched in and truly of the place. So I don't think we can cut that phase out altogether. We can just potentially compress it greatly. Our other thought for right sizing the scope is at the other end of the process, recognizing that this is an opening salvo, a kind of design focused effort that will have a future implementation phase, the actual building, constructing, and installing these signs and wayfinding and placemaking ideas. Where our minds are going to the fact that we could reduce the amount of detailed documentation at the end of this first scope. In other words, keep things a little more top level, rely a little more heavily on the sign fabricators who would be helping with a pricing role to, basically produce less detailed drawings had anticipated, simply again to try to get right size the scope for what you have in your funds available now. So I think long story short, Sadie, I think though our conversation was brief, you got a lot of good information across to us. Willing to revise the scope by trimming it on the front end and the back end, keep what we believe is the core need at the moment, and reduce, like get down into the fee range of funds that you have available. Hit this hard with you, make it super collaborative, probably quite accelerated to keep it within a nice tight package, and also recognizing you've got urgency to, we've got to get some outcomes from this. We do understand that you need a priceable outcome in order to justify or to get the funds for the next steps. We imagine wherever we land in this first burst of energy must be detailed just enough to be priceable. Does that sound right to you all?
Yes.
Okay. So, if we could use this session to hear from each of you really on what the most high priority aspects of this project are, I believe it will help us just be sure to be laser focused on the key goals and thereby get the scope down into just the right buckets. So I don't know from a time standpoint if we have a moment to hear from each of you, but
We
it would
do.
be our dream to listen here. Steve, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you answered my first question thoroughly 3 different ways already. But just to be clear, your scope and quote come in considering that we just went through a very extensive rebrand and artistically and conceptually, it starts there. You're not overlapping with that.
Steve, thanks for bringing that up. Absolutely, we are up to speed. Sadie's been sharing with us both the brand strategy plus some of the visual assets, the new identity, maybe most importantly, the story. And I think, yes, just to say it out loud, our great objective is to take that thinking and begin applying it in a physical way to the built environment. And we fully anticipate collaborating with the team, with Ember, use that
Okay.
work
That was
as
my
part of
second.
this effort.
Yeah, my second part of it, is there any value to having Ember uh, involved, or is it a complication? Is there any monetary value to, if because we'd be paying him to work with you because he. So I'm trying to figure out, is it a complication or is it a value add to have Ember involved?
Yeah, Steve, I truly think there'd be great value in a little opening download, like a hearing from Ember for us directly in order to just accelerate the process of imbibing what's been produced and even some of what's been top of mind for their team about how that gets applied. I think then we can be pretty much on our own starting to generate the concepts. I believe it would be valuable for Ember to provide a bit of a peer review or a like, you know, weigh in, so to speak, on okay, how does this resonate? Are we fully exploring the potential of what we've produced? Uh, Long story short, I don't think this needs to be a step by step collaboration, but I think it'd be great to have a beginning and 3/4 the way through touch points just to make sure that we're leveraging the full value of the work you've already put in. Does that make sense and sound right to you?
Yes, I have one, sorry, one more question. How important do you feel that is that all these different entities need to have a cohesive brand? Like, the Kumba signage at V Camp, the Argo in the city, and maybe even, the future parking mobility center.
Yeah, our sense is that this is about creating a rich, multi-layered experience. As in, we're not trying to create a everything feels the same experience. We're trying to create a first you can do this, and then you get to go do that. And then, in other words, um, our sense is this scope is about representing the city of Idaho Springs as a framework for a great and wonderful diversity of things that fits within that, whether those are the individual retail offerings, the hospitality, or these, you know, experiences, the hot springs, the Virginia Canyon Mountain Park is a bit of a gray area. I'd say that Idaho Springs as a city could claim that a bit more as part of the municipal parks system, and therefore purposefully created maybe a bit more of a thread of continuity. So maybe to try to answer that a bit more clearly, our sense is that the outcome of this effort will be the public realm that ties it all together. The streets, trails, and parking moments and the space between that is about helping to reveal the wonderfully diverse experiences in every direction that Idaho Springs is offering and are coming online. Our minds do go to the visitor center, that kind of opening point, or I know over the years there have been various ways to help orient people to what's available, and do think that some of our opening conversations for this scope would be about points of orientation, like what types of sequences of arrival are we seeking to create from the city's perspective. So I think we'd enter this with a recognition that this isn't about everything in Idaho Springs. This is about what the city of Idaho Springs controls, so to speak. It's that the space between public realm and maybe the city itself, City Hall and some of the city-owned elements. Dylan, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that.
Perspective on, can you, what specifically? Sorry.
On the amount of focus that this scope of work has on the city of Idaho Springs, its land
Yeah.
holdings, the public realm, some of its own buildings, the park system. This is really about city signage. Do you agree?
Right. I would agree. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and I've talked to our administrator and that a little bit, I think the clear goal, as far as I'm concerned, is to get people where they generally want to go the quickest and the easiest. And I think right now the two places are either A, downtown and all of the shops and services and restaurants, which is the number one draw. And now the
Yes.
number two draw in town, in my opinion, would be the mountain park and the gondola as that comes online, because that's going to attract the same amount of people per day, and there will be some overlap, but not a ton. I think my goal would be get people going in both directions. Obviously, a mountain biker's not necessarily going downtown, because the main purpose of a mountain bike ride is the ride itself, but there's
Yes.
going to be a lot of folks on the gondola who will want to go to Bojo's after or whatever. And the big concern that I hear from residents all the time is there's so many cars circling around, and it makes it impossible for me to get to the grocery store, and it's just such a huge headache and all this stuff. And we all here pretty much live close by or spend a lot of time in town. I live in town, and I think that issue is often overblown, but it's it is a big concern because the community says it's a big concern. And
Yes.
so I would like to see the wayfinding focus so that you can kind of get to like certain hubs where people really want to go, and then from there the wayfinding signage and information makes it easier for people to just leave their car in that one hub and get everywhere else they need to go. I think that's critical for the city. And then within that, some of our small buildings like City Hall or our historic buildings, I think we can probably wayfind at a pedestrian scale pretty easily, because they're not really the huge draws for most visitors. It's kind of an extra bonus to go look at, an old hose house from 1890 or something like that.
Sure. That makes sense. I know there's a significant reorganization. The mobility hub is out there coming. I'm curious to talk about sequencing here. For example, should we be designing for the future where the new roundabout is in place and the mobility hub is there? Or is the goal to create some interim solutions before any of that is constructed?
I think based off of a pretty unknown timeline of execution of
Yep.
those implementations, while we want to be considerate that especially, for example, the mobility hub and parking structure will be a high priority, the rest of the components of the redesign due to the timeline, due to funding, I think it's about awareness of those things coming online. However, I'm not sure that we want to be spending a ton of time focusing on how to implement for those things. I think it's about building a broad awareness that they will be coming online and
Sure.
consideration of them.
Yeah, not
However,
making any major investments that would then be ripped out to
Right.
replace.
exactly.
Well, and I think a good thing to consider is even in the current iteration or in future iteration where there's a structure and there's a mobility hub transit center, it still is broadly in the same location as where most people come into the city now. Most folks, regardless, are coming off at exit 240, I would say, if they're going downtown. And so whether there's a structure there or not, I think we can still push people to that same area. So that way folks who are repeat users know this is where we get off the highway. It can help. This is where we get off. This is the streets we take to then get to where in the future we have our main hub of activity. And if you're taking a bus in the future, it's the same guidance, I guess, to get you where you want to go. Obviously, so I think that can work quite well, hopefully, in the interim and in the future. And it'll be the same thing with connecting the east and west end. Those connections still need to be there one way or the other.
Right.
Whether we have a parking structure with an extra, 250 spaces, or we have, surface parking, and people still need to get to both sides. So if there's a way to plan for that and kind of make it work either way without huge changes needed, then that's a great win, I think, from a city perspective.
Yes.
City staff planning.
Great. Well, Sadie, help us start a bit of a quick round robin for continuing stating top of mind goals or objectives for the effort.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to go ahead and have Lana speak as well a little bit. I know she's got some tight times today, so I appreciate her making the time to be on. That way, if you do have to jump, Lana, I know you said you had some tight times today. So go ahead, Lana.
Yeah, so I guess you guys both Steve and then I think Dylan kind of touched on my two areas of questions. My first question and the design question is Ember more just there to make sure that you guys are adhering to the brand standards that we've already set, or would Ember be doing some design work?
Yeah, I guess my expectation would be more of a ensuring that we're capitalizing on the best of the ideas and more of a voice of continuity with branding effort. But we wouldn't be relying on them for design solutions. I will say that there may be a intersection around messaging and content that I could imagine them weighing in on. So for example, if we arrive at some sort of orientation moment that has the opportunity for a headline or kind of a attitude about the language for what's being conveyed, I just feel like they'd be really well suited to provide some ideas for that, for example.
Okay, so their efforts would probably be like minimal in time and scope, but significant in getting the right messaging and branding standards.
That sounds right to me, but we're also open. If I know that you all have been working with them, we haven't been. So
I'm just trying to get a concept for additional costs that might be involved. So because there's your proposal understood. And then what we might be paying out.
We're trying to fit the two into the bucket. I get it.
And then my second question is more about like longevity. And I know, the conversation you just had with Dylan is kind of on the same lines, is that like, what is the lifespan of a project like this? Do you expect it to last decades, a decade, 5 years? Like, are we changing kind of like, how do you take that into account when you're making these plans and, designing them and implementing them? That what is the lifespan? Like, when does the city need to refresh their
Right.
wayfinding?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to look back and what's currently in place in Idaho Springs. You can almost see those different layers of time in the rear view mirror. It's interesting. In other words, these things do have a bit of a shelf life. I would expect that we'd be looking 15 to 20 years type perspective. And what I mean by that is material selection. This is about architectural materials. This is about durable things meant to be invested in for the long haul. Long haul, not the 100-year haul, but the 15, 20-year haul. I bet that there are going to be key elements of the system that are much more dynamic. For example, if we arrive at some sort of map or spatial representation of the city, we'd be recognizing that must be updatable, that things are actively changing. We may find that it's beneficial to create some representation of even future plans that help people understand both what's there now and what's coming. Those types of services we very much want to get just right, invest only the amount needed to create something that's meant to change. So does that broadly answer your question, Lily?
It does. Mostly I'm just trying to figure out like the money we spend now, like what's the investment we're making? Like
Right.
if we spend 30 or 60, is the
Well, I'm
60,000 a
afraid
better
to say
investment
that,
than 30 or?
right, the design, the fees for design and strategy and thinking are one thing, but the implementation, the actual building of this is going to be a lift. As I mentioned, these are architectural materials. You may have commissioned and paid for signs in the past. You may know this, but it's just, they're always more expensive than anybody wants them to be. And, I think from an implementation standpoint, I'm thinking, we've got to be 800,000 to $1.5 million. Like this is going to be a significant, to build this out, likely is going to be a lift in exponentially larger than the design fees that we're talking about today.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So it's almost
as
like
the
this,
city turns toward that, I just want to make sure we have that in our
right.
sights.
That
The
makes sense. So it's almost
implementation is
like the
gonna be
work we're
bigger.
talking about today might have more longevity than the work that we're going to do when we actually implement it.
Right. And our anticipation is that we're going to have a long view system that emerges from this, and then there'll be a phased implementation so that maybe only a few pieces of a longer view master plan, so to speak, would get built first. And it has to do with all sorts of things, funding appropriate, like, for example, new infrastructure is indeterminate timeline. Only after building the infrastructure would you install those elements of the system. So our goal would be to emerge from this effort with a set of ideas that can last, that have staying power
Okay.
and get implemented in phases, very likely.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That was all I had. So.
Great. Well,
Also, Lana, is there anything that you would consider as top priority when you're looking at this project from a broad spectrum for what our big needs are now, or where you see our major pain points are? Or is there anything you think is most important to be focusing on?
I do think the conversations around the continuity with any other branding and signage that's going up, from what I was understanding from the conversation earlier, is it sounds like most of the Argo signage will be, and closer to where they are, but then they'll partner with the city on the signs that are out into the community. And so I think that's important, but also I kind of lean into if the city's paying for it and it's the city signs, yes, other businesses are throwing in some cash and that's important. But also we just need to keep in line that we're doing this as a community focus, not a business focus. And so that's sort of so in my mind, the brand colors we've picked, those are the colors of the signs. Those are the fonts we use. Those are how we do the signs. I understand that we're working in partnership with some other businesses who are putting in some money, but this is still about the city, not about those businesses from my perspective. So.
Thank you, Lana. I appreciate that. Tara?
Hi. I have a couple things. It's like a little all over the place, but just like notes as we go. I think it'd be amazing if we could afford to work with y'all. I think setting this structure up would be great. I have a question. Sadie, do you think that we would be able to, like the city would be able to eventually afford implementing this? Because this doesn't include any of the physical signs or anything, right?
Correct. So this is
Okay.
just the strategy component. In my 26 budget ask is us applying for another grant from CTO in 26, that a portion of that would be dedicated towards implementation, and then also another budgetary ask to get a bigger budget towards being able to implement these. Obviously, that's dependent on council approving the budgetary ask. So it is in my budgetary ask for 26 for us to budget to implement this. And as Dylan has spoken, the city has identified that this is a need. And we do know that it's a priority. And again, I'm going in front of city council on Monday to talk through this.
And would that be based off a recommendation by Tommy? Because like, so like, I don't want us to not necessarily know how much to ask for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So the ask is actually structured around the grant and how much grant funds there are available and how much matching funds the city would be required to contribute for that. And again, similar to what Tommy is saying, this, because of our budgetary constraints, being in a small municipality the way we are, this might need to be a phased approach. We can apply for continued grants to continue to, again, meet those match points.
Okay.
So
Maybe a
again,
rough order of magnitude, what do you think the combined grant
Yes.
pledge match grant is for the
yeah,
first
so
tranche?
for next year, there's a 50 grand grant available from CTO, which would be a match, would put us about 100 grand.
Okay.
It's almost a 2-to-1 match. So that would be for 26, and it's a 3-year grant term, meaning that we could apply for that grant for 2 additional years because we got awarded this year. So we have 2 more years to apply before we have to opt out from CTO. In addition, obviously, Dylan and I are looking at additional grants that we could also, because we're a heritage community and the historic preservation in this community is so strong, there are quite a few heritage grants that we could also be applying for. Right now, again, what I put into the budget from the city's perspective is 50 with the grant also for 26.
And there's some other signage related stuff that, like, for our historic sites, they need some brass plaques and things.
Yep.
That some of them are missing, and there's some specific signage needs for that, and there's some specific signage needs for the Greenway Trail. So I've talked to Andy about both of those, plus I've talked to him about just general wayfinding signage. So I definitely think, as far as budget goes, Andy will be on top of that, because we want to implement as much as possible next year. So yeah, that goes even beyond you, Sadie, I think, is to say we want to get, like, I think it's critical from a planning perspective too. So I think it'll definitely get budgeted.
Okay, perfect. And then like I said, I think it'd be amazing if we could work with y'all. And then just a few like touch points came up as a local to me and as a business owner, and definitely the water wheel. People don't know you can just walk over there. And then whenever I'm like, go over there, like there's no sign. So like I think that that could be essential, and that honestly we could make a lot of money off of that because people are staying longer and then they're spending money and then we're getting those sales tax dollars, because I think it's a huge feature that is completely underutilized, and I have no idea how much that whole build out costs, but it's beautiful. Another space that's I think unutilized is like the west end of the bike trail. Like every time I ride out there, like we're by ourselves. It's like me and my husband, and that's it. The another touch point that I think is essential would be, as Dylan described, the east and the west end connection, because there's the East End businesses contribute a lot, but unfortunately, the way that the architecture like of the city is set up, we've got our historic district, and that's just I mean, you guys are what I'm saying, you're architects.
Sure.
And
And a
then
pinch.
the other thing that Dylan touched on is we don't have a stoplight in town, so like our lives are much, much easier than other people's. So like, but the slowness, like every single time I'm on Colorado, the person is driving 20, then 25, then 20, then 25. They turn on their blinker, they don't turn. They turn on their blinker, they don't turn. And like that's obviously a wayfinding issue. So just
Right.
a sign to downtown would like make everyone their lives much easier, because Safeway's in the middle of town, so that's where locals are trying to get to. They're coming from the residents, they're going to, and when you're going west, the person's like, where do I go? Where do I go? Another like roadblock that I would foresee would be working with the visitor center and the historic society. So I think building a good relationship with them would be essential, because there's a lot of our older citizens that participate in that, and they do kind of have their own culture and dynamic. So I think making sure that we are working with them in a positive, I mean, not that you wouldn't, but just I think that there's sometimes an element of exclusivity with it. And so just really building those relationships with the people who work there and are
Yes.
involved in that would be important.
Who would you say the top 2 or 3 people to
I
get to
don't
know would
know,
be? Okay,
honestly,
I get you.
but I think once you like
Same.
meet them and stuff, I think
I
that,
see.
and I mean, Sadie has a good relationship with them, Steve has a good relationship with them, but I think to be able to really get the visitor center to the potential that you might see, I would just, keep in mind that there's a whole social element going on over there.
Yep.
And then, oh, just keeping in mind too, the rafting community, because they contribute a ton of money. Like everybody who comes in the store in the summer just went rafting.
Nice.
So kind of making sure that that is not, because, Compa's doing their thing, which is amazing. Argo's doing their thing, which is amazing. The historic district, but just making sure that that's also part of the table, I think, would be
I love
smart.
that idea. Wayfinding up from the water's edge. Like that's a great point.
I think that was all of my stuff.
Thank you so much,
Or
Tara.
what do you see on those your bridges as you're floating under them?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
interesting
there's
too.
so
I
many
love that
ideas, and
perspective.
just knowing that you guys did Union Station, I mean, when I think about that place, there's so many signs, but you
Yes, there
find
are.
all the businesses,
Good.
so like, yeah.
Great. Well, excellent. Thanks for that input.
Jeannie?
That's helpful.
Yes.
Do you have anything that you feel is important for Tommy to know as he's looking at refining this scope, of what you feel is important to him to focus on?
I think everyone has touched on the more important.
Okay. All right, do you feel complete? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Steve, I'm gonna let you bring us home and make sure there's nothing else you feel is important as we kind of continue to wrap this.
Well, obviously, the ultimate function of this wayfinding, in which I experienced on this side of town with the parking area behind our building, is trying to have the customer, the guest, leave with a positive experience. Because you can stand on our loading dock and watch a car come in through a rather narrow passageway into not the most pleasantly experienced the back of our building with a grain trailer and a multi-level parking area that's not really laid out well. And they go around once and they're like looking for parking, and they go around a second time, their face is a little redder. The conversation in the car, you can tell, is getting a little more intense, and they go around a third time, and then they can't even figure out how to leave. They're like, how do we get out of here? And they leave with a bad experience because they can't find parking and they can't figure out where to go to find more parking or to even leave. So that's a big one. And I witness it all the time. So it's personal. The other solution to solve is we have this, as we know, this Placer AI and piece of data, all these great attractions in the summertime that people are coming to. We have a big advantage. Like, let's just say 1 million people came and got off the highway in our county this summer, and we only really capitalized on 14% of them. So how to maybe have attractions or signage at some of these attractions, like the rafting, like you're saying, under the bridges, those are on point, but there's also these little more outside hiking trails, which aren't V camp, and try to get those people to come into town and hopefully not have a bad parking experience. And then we don't have that coming up here, and I'm really nervous about this winter because I saw it happen last winter where we don't have those attractions. The only thing people get off the highway for in the wintertime is to spend money at one of our establishments because there's nothing really free to do. And then I feel like, I mean, the numbers show that the people driving by here in the wintertime are spending $200-300 on a lift ticket and spending money at the resort. The resorts are doing pretty well, but even the communities at the resorts aren't doing well. They're leaving the resorts and hopping on the highway. Immediately, their spirit is broken by the traffic, and they're driving right by Idaho Springs. So I don't know if there's any signage or communication or like relax, coming to Idaho Springs, or some way to communicate them to get off the highway because they're just not doing it. I experienced it last winter, and I wouldn't get off the highway either. But maybe there's some solution with wayfinding. That's it.
Right, Steve.
Thank
Your
you, Steve.
first point about leaving with a good experience, we have a acronym we use in design, ADROIT, which is arrival, decompression, reception, orientation, and then they have their experience. And no one really figured out the best word for the T, but we use termination, or it's the exit, the departure. But being really conscious about those layers of experience and seeking to design for each of the layers, including the departures. You're speaking our language. I think that's really good, helpful perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you all
Steve.
for sharing those points. That's super helpful context to understand.
Okay, wonderful. So I think the board really actively covered kind of where the focus is, and I think they all hammered home that it is important for us to do it right the first time, and that as we are growing, this is the first time Idaho Springs has made an investment in a brand, in a story, in a message, because we, from the city's perspective, are very much invested in creating a sustainable growth pattern so that our businesses continue to thrive and continue to grow. And we know how important investment is in that. And we are still fighting a conversation with our city government about sometimes you need to spend money to make more money. So we are working kind of on helping them understand that shift in perspective. So we really appreciate your understanding as we're moving forward in that direction. I think probably our next best wise step is allow Tommy and his team to kind of digest what we talked about and come back to us with a revision on his proposal. And then board members, I will go ahead as soon as I receive that from Tommy, send that back out to us. Again, I'm not feeling super stretched on our time just because CTO is aware that we're in the process of maybe making some changes. So I'm not feeling really uncomfortable as of right now on our tight timeline. They do know at this point that we will be pushing our timeline into 26, which is fully acceptable for the grant timeline as of right now. So I do think that it gives us time to have Tommy kind of digest what we've discussed, come back at us with something that might feel more in alignment with our current budgetary needs. And then board, we can go ahead and make a decision on the best next step moving forward. I did have on the agenda today for us to make a decision. And I think as of right now, the only thing I do need the board's approval on is to go ahead and approve me submitting a change in timeline scope with CTO. It won't speak to changing a scope in any way. However, I do want to submit an official change of timeline just so that that's done and off my plate, and we don't have to worry about being stretched and meeting any kind of certain timelines that we've already set. So that's really, I think, the only motion or action item I'll need from the board today. Otherwise, Tommy, do you feel like that is a good next best step for us?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Sadie, the idea of building on analysis and materials that you already have, I don't know at what point you're willing to share those with us or even share them and walk us through them. But I don't know, maybe in a
Absolutely.
much smaller setting, like just you, me, and Josh get together in the near future and just get oriented on
I think Dylan
what
would be
that is.
another excellent
Okay,
contributing partner in that.
great.
Dylan and I have already done a lot of that foundational work. So maybe the four of us jumping on a meeting to kind of talk through what research we've already done, where we sit on where signs currently are, where we know our pain points are,
Yes,
where our lack is. A lot of that has already been put together. So I'd be happy for the four of us to jump on a call to go through that.
great. Well, maybe we let that be somewhat of a parallel thing. Like we
Sure,
do that possibly early next week, mid next week,
sure.
and then we provide a revised proposal by at the very latest this time next week, maybe earlier.
Okay, that
Great.
seems in alignment. I know Dylan and I have some flexibility early next week. So we would be able to work around your schedule early next week.
Okay.
Specifically, I think both of us are pretty flexible on Tuesday.
Okay.
So I know Monday's a tight day for us both because we've got council. However, Tuesday is a pretty flexible day. So if you want to send us some options for Tuesday, I can get Dylan and I on a meeting for that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if 2 o'clock might happen to work for both of you, or we can do this on email, but would
We
2
might as well
o'clock be
just
an
get
option?
it off the calendar if we can do it. 2 o'clock works for me, Dylan, if 2 o'clock works for you.
Yeah, that works.
Great.
Cool. 2 o'clock
Well,
it is.
Dylan, maybe you can tell us about that sweet slice of topography you have behind you. Love
yeah.
that wall
I-
graphic.
It's old now, but it's basically the entire city
Love it.
from east to west. You have to really be in the office to fully appreciate it, but
Nice.
it's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, before we close board, I do want to go ahead and open up to a motion to apply for, or let's word this motion correctly for someone to repeat. Motion for me to submit a change of timeline to CTO.
So moved. Exactly what Sadie said.
Yep.
Lana, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, awesome, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and remind you guys, we do have 2 o'clock Monday at City Hall for our standard meeting, and I'm going to adjourn us at 10:13 a.m. And I'll send out meeting notes for the remainder of the board that was not here. And I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank
Thank you,
thank you
Good
very
to
much.
speak with you all.
all right, thank you. Uh-huh.
Look forward